Sequels. There's a lot of sequels. There's other stuff going on, but sequels. I'm Matthew and welcome to your board game news. First up this week is the 1 to 6 player sequel to Dune Imperium, and that's Dune Imperium Uprising, coming from the same publisher, Direwolf, and the same designer, that's Paul Dennen. It's fair to say that Dune Imperium was pretty wildly successful, and in Uprising, which is being described as a standalone spin-off, you want to continue to balance military might with political intrigue, all while wielding new tools in pursuit of victory as, of course, spies in the background shore up your plans. You'll be in the pursuit of vital contracts to expand your resources while perhaps learning the mysterious ways of the Fremen by, and this does sound a bit wild, riding mighty sandworms into battle. We're promised that Uprising will expand on the original blend of deck building and worker placement while also introducing a new 6-player mode that allows you to pit 2 teams against each other. Also interesting is that the previous game's expansions, both Rise of Ix and Immortality, will work with the new game, as well as do almost all the cards from the base game, and elements of Uprising can be used within Dune Imperium, the original game. And to find out what that all means, we only have to wait until a little later this year. And now prepare to flex your gaming muscle with the game that helped make this episode possible, the AEW edition of the Versus System 2-player card game from Upper Deck. Go from wrestling mat to playmat in the newest 200 card giant-sized professional wrestling starter. The new expansion to the Versus System 2-player card game universe had an overwhelming successful debut at Gen Con. Now you too can take all the action home. Can you beat the all-elite wrestling challengers in this test of skill, guts and strategy? Get ready to step into the ring and unleash your inner champion as the electrifying world of wrestling joins Upper Deck's long-standing Versus system for the very first time. Follow the link in this video's description to find it and fight as your favourite stars such as Chris Jericho, Chris Statlander, Sting, MJF, Jade Cargill and more. Available now at a friendly local game store and of course at upperdeckstore.com. There is set to be a third game in the Horrified lineup of co-op games from Ravensburger, and that's the 1 to 5 player Horrified Greek Monsters. In this one, Pandora's box has been opened and Greece's most notorious monsters have escaped, and it's your job as you become the avatar of the Greek gods to team up and recapture them. In total, there are 6 monsters: Medusa, Cerberus, Chimera, the Minotaur, Basilisk and the Siren, who all reside in their own hidden locations that must first be located. And each monster has their own unique abilities, and of course, the more monsters you add into the game, the harder the challenge, with players needing to use their unique powers to figure out how to win later this year when it's released. Fire Siege, a Forellis story, was announced by Deer Game Studio. This one is a limited communication cooperative game for 1 to 5 players where each player controls a Vulcan hero with unique abilities and skills, and turn after turn you play action cards to resist the siege of the army of Skriel that are crawling into the city of Mida to kill you and your leader. Apparently, and unfortunately for us, the enemy's army is near infinite, thus in order to win your troops must outmaneuver the Skriel by fulfilling different goal cards. It's a board game. When that's done and all 6 banner tokens are finally flipped, you'll win, and it's the different challenges on these cards that change the game up each time you play. This looks cool to me. I read the phrase, "Be aware though, each action in battle triggers a reaction," such as when playing a card you only get to know one side of it, while the other players get to know the other side. And as this is a co-op and limited communication, I can see myself doing something that I alone believe to have been very smart and possibly genius, while everyone else looks at me with terrified bewilderment. And they will be doing that a little bit later this year. There were a few really interesting announcements from DLP Games, starting with the Pirates of Maracaibo, a new standalone game in the same line as the original Maracaibo. This one is co-designed by Alexander Pfister for 1 to 4 players who, if they are familiar with Maracaibo, will recognise many of the concepts here, but this looks geared to allow new players to jump into it as it touts a more accessible rule set. The game plays over 3 rounds where you'll sail the Caribbean, hire crew, ally with other ships, explore the shores, amass the most treasure and retire to a secluded island as the most revered pirate in history. Then there's also from DLP Games the Cathedral of Orléans, when it's 1598 and you have settled in the middle of France in the city of Orleans, and your goal is clear, and that's to build a gosh dang cathedral of Orleans. Now, the description from the publisher on Board Game Geek was, well, they need to go back over that again and give it another try, because many of the words that they used are not real words. But this looks to be a family co-op game that takes its core from the original Orleans game. And that means a lot of bag building goodness, but instead of your own bag to build, there are 2 communal bags to add and draw from. And the trick, of course, is remembering what was put into each bag so that when you draw to build a cathedral, you get the stuff that you actually wanted before the game ends. DLP have been incredibly busy, it seems, because they have also announced a 2 to 5 player expansion to the original Orleans game, and this one's called The Plague, which sounds lovely. Orleans has been hit hard, plague doctors can only help so much, and things are made much more difficult by rat cards that are introduced that looks like they make things just harder. Sometimes there are fewer monks in the game, sometimes no gears can be placed on players' cards, or the buildings and trading stations must be paid for with an additional coin, that type of thing. New events involve something called corpse tokens, of which players have to place a certain number in their bag at the end of each round. And when you draw a corpse, unsurprisingly, they don't do much other than just occupy space. Getting rid of those corpses is a good way to get victory points, and this sounds like a wonderful way to just enhance this game, and you can expect this one later this year. But now let's take a look at the latest games available to play online in this segment sponsored by Board Game Arena. Now available to play online is Dog Lover, in which players rescue beloved dogs, train them new tricks and cherish their unique traits. During the game you'll be fetching cards, collecting bones and gathering food for your lovable dogs. The player who can take care of their beloved dog the best will score the most points and win the game. Also available are colour coordinating card game Colour Flush and the game of creating card compositions Canvas. Follow the link in this video's description to learn and play these games and hundreds of others online at Board Game Arena. Some more quickfire announcements now, starting with a surprise Uwe Rosenberg game from Korea Board Games Co. This one's called Tangram City, where 1 to 5 players are prestigious city planners ordered by the Queen herself to build harmonious cities, taking care to balance the human and natural realms by creating equal amounts of building and park tiles. You'll also want to try to create rectangular shapes if you can, which is made slightly more difficult by the fact that you don't have any of those. All the tiles are weird shapes. This one looks right up my street. Fantasia Games, who brought us Endless Winter and Unconscious Mind, are teaming up with artist Ian O'Toole for a new edition of the 3 to 5 player Colosseum. There's updated rules, new modules to be added in, and what they're describing as deluxe components. But that's not all, as they also announced a brand new standalone game. And that's Colosseum Ave Titus. It's a 1 to 4 player worker placement game that's described as coming out of the love for the original. They wanted to create a thematic heavy Euro game surrounding the historic games of Titus, and both games are currently set for next year. And Direwolf Digital made a fairly ambiguous post about the Wheel of Time tabletop game, slated for 2024. That's the whole announcement. We know nothing else, even what they mean by tabletop game, frankly, at this point, but more on that when we do know. Horror on the Orient Express has been announced as a 1 to 4 player game coming from Chaosium. We are lured into the luxurious yet dangerous interiors of the most famous train of the 1920s, though this version of the Orient Express does travel into the realm of dreamlands instead of, going through Vienna. But we are told to beware of the hideous monsters crawling out of the breaches, as well as cultists hiding among the decadent passengers, because much like British trains, everything is against you. Not forgetting, of course, an eldritch bloodthirsty vampire that's set on hunting you down, and you need to beat them all while also investigating the train's other dark secrets. So in this one, you control a character who can develop new skills, gather items, talk to passengers, discover clues, learn spells, and ultimately decide the fate of the train, also enjoying some co-op board game fun on a doomed train. To win, you have to discover and hunt the cultists to stop them performing a hideous ritual, as well as ensuring that the train reaches its destination. And it's doing all this using the much beloved Horror on the Orient Express setting for the tabletop role-playing game Call of Cthulhu, as well as providing what's being called ongoing character development with a campaign and narrative choices to be made. They were showing the starting phases of this one at Gen Con, but its release date isn't until 2025. But for something that's happening right now, it's this week's On the Radar, where a very different tale of intrigue and betrayal is quite frankly going on. I'll see you over there.